Welcome to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. He is back. He is Anthony Rendon. He is a member of the California State Assembly. He chairs Water, Parks, and Wildlife. I follow you on Twitter. Your Twitter handle is Rendon63rd AD. And the reason I say that is you came up with a term that I love, aquapocalypse. And the aquapocalypse will happen if
we don't get a bond on the ballot by June 26th.
And let's talk about the bond. It's a fascinating journey, this water bond that was slated to be on the ballot in 2010 after a grand compromise between Democrats and Republicans, North State, South State, East State, West State.
Right.
But it didn't happen for a variety of reasons, which were?
Well, in 2009, the legislature negotiated a bond. This was before my freshman class was here. They negotiated a bond that in the last few days rose from about $8 billion to $11.14 billion.
Right.
Folks just felt at that point that it was just too large, and if it got in front of voters, the voters would not vote for it.
Okay.
So twice it was pulled off the ballot. Last March it was sent back to our committee to kind of look at it again.
That being said, it was a grand compromise. Some called it pork, but you know, your pork can be my tasty bacon.
Sure.
And so, I mean, is it necessarily a problem that this bond was $11 billion with certain pet projects in it?
It was. I mean, I think a lot of the survey data sort of bore that out. A lot of folks looked at the data, and in general, anything north of $10 billion is going to be something that's going to be exceptionally difficult for voters to pass.
So let's talk about where we are today. I think it's fair to say that Democrats and Republicans are coming together on getting a bond on the ballot. You do need 2/3 to get it on the ballot through the legislature, and as a result of some machinations in the Senate, there is not a 2/3 majority amongst Democrats. There is still in the Assembly.
Right.
But you do have allies in the Republican caucus on the Senate side. But there is one issue that there is some divide, and that is the size of money for storage, which is a buzzword for dams,
reservoirs.
Right. So where are we on the storage issue?
The storage issue, and there are competing bonds, in all fairness.
Right.
My bond is AB 1331, is the name of the vehicle. Name of the bond is AB 1331. My bond currently has $2.5 billion set aside for storage.
Which is fairly high, relatively speaking.
It is
The
fairly
Republicans have proposed $3 billion. Some of your Democratic colleagues proposed $1.5 billion. So you're on the north side of that. Yeah. Do you believe that even that is enough to address the dramatic losses we have seen in our reservoirs over the last 2-3 years?
I'll be honest with you, I don't think anything in this bond or the total bond in general is enough to even begin to address our long-term infrastructural issues in the state. Take one aspect of the bond. You talked about water storage. Let's talk about that, but let's also talk about clean and safe drinking water. The US EPA has estimated that we could spend $20 billion just to ensure that we have safe drinking water in the state of California. We have $20 billion in needs. If you add up all the needs relating to safe and clean drinking water in the state, it adds up to $20 billion. The bond that I've developed has $1 billion. It's 5%. So is there enough money in the current bond in AB 1331 to address our storage needs? No. But there's not enough funds in any of the bonds to address our water needs. We have huge infrastructure.
I want to talk about groundwater, which
Sure.
also is an element of storage. I mean, you can put water in the ground. I continue to be baffled by the fact, just as an observer, that California really doesn't regulate groundwater.
Right.
I think 49 states do, and California does not.
Right.
Does the bond address either the lack of regulation or provide funding for groundwater storage?
No, the bond does not provide regulation. Assemblymember Dickinson, who represents Sacramento, has a bill right now that I'm a co-author of that begins to address that issue. You're right, it's a legal morass. For whatever reason, there's this legal vacuum with respect to groundwater. So Assemblymember Dickinson has been working exceptionally hard on a groundwater regulation bill. That'll be in front of our committee on Tuesday.
Okay, we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens with that. And this bond does provide funds for groundwater.
In what capacity? Is it to I mean, how do you increase storage for groundwater? What does that mean?
Well, you can increase the size, the actual size of the capacity of the groundwater, the sort of containers, if you will. But there's also funds that can be used for groundwater cleanup, which is a huge problem, particularly here in Southern California.
What about other mechanisms to try to improve our water supply? It could be recycling. Where are we on fronts along those lines?
It's interesting you bring that up. This morning, I just took a tour of a recycling plant not far from here, down the highway.
We're in Long Beach today.
We're in Long Beach today. This was over in Whittier along the 605 freeway. Fantastic recycling facility. They do great water recycling in Orange County, great water recycling in Santa Clara. That very much is, I think, where we need to go as a state. A lot of these local solutions that help to eliminate a lot of the reliance on the Colorado River and the Delta, for example.
Recycling can be expensive.
It can be.
But are we getting to a point where economies of scale are being created so it's not quite as expensive?
Absolutely. The reverse osmosis process is usually what usually what's most expensive. We have less expensive modes of doing water recycling, but the reverse osmosis method is becoming less expensive because of, as you said, because of economies of scale.
We have to talk about the Delta.
Absolutely.
Which in a lot of ways is a buzzword for excitement and a buzzword for frustration.
Right.
Where are we on the Delta? We know courts have continually held, whether you like it or not, that there's a little fish called the Delta smelt that deserves protection, and that means that a lot of water has to be dedicated to that Delta smelt.
Right, exactly. And in my bond, AB 1331, there's $1 billion dedicated to Delta remediation, and the smelt is just the start of the problems relating to the Delta. We have problems with sea level rise, we have problems with salination, tremendous amount of problems relating to the Delta, and that $1 billion begins to help to address those issues.
And in the background of all of this is arguably one of the most important industries in our state, and that's agriculture. $45 billion. You know, we live in Southern California. If we live just 200-300 miles north, it's all ag. And people their livelihoods are based on ag. As a result, they use a lot of water. I mean, some say up to 80% of the state's water is for ag. So where do we go on the question of protecting our fellow citizens who work in ag?
Good question. Again, there are a lot of local solutions that can be used, and so much of the discussion centers on the Central Valley. Obviously, we do a significant amount of farming closer to home in places like Ventura, at Oxnard, where again a lot of the local solutions can be helpful. We do farming down in Coachella Valley. So we need to focus on local solutions which are more cost effective, they're less injurious to the environment, and a huge component that people often forget about water is transporting water and the energy involved in that. So if we can rely on local solutions, we'll be all the better.
Should we also be looking at what ag we're planting? I mean, grapes, God, we love our wine in California, but they love water. Almonds. I mean, great crop, but use a lot of water.
No, you're absolutely right. That has to be part of the equation, as well as just a lot of looking at solutions to saving water in the agricultural community, as they've done in places like Australia and in places like Israel that have had droughts and had to adjust.
What about today? These solutions that we're discussing, 3, 5, 10 years before they reap rewards. We have a drought today. What do we do today?
I'm glad you brought that up. What's important to know about this bond is that this bond is meant to address the next drought. It's too late for this drought. This drought, a lot of the problems relating to this drought, and we're doing this interview in late April. We haven't seen the bad summer months ahead yet. It will get worse. The drought legislation that the governor and the legislature worked on in January and February, about $673 million, I believe. That is going to be used now to address the drought that we're currently experiencing. The reason we keep talking about aquapocalypse, the reason we keep talking about the need to get something on the ballot is because, again, this bond is meant to address the next drought. We have pushed this bond back twice. We have not acted for 4 years. If we push this back again and continue to not act, then it's 6 years, and then
Now could be the time.
Now could be the time.
His name is Anthony Rendon, member of the California State Assembly. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition.
The Delta provides what % of Southern California's water? 5, 12, 23 or 30%. Southern California receives 30% of its water from the Delta.
It's Charter California edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and the chair of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors is with us. His name is Don Knabe, and I want to speak with you about our children, our most precious resource, one could say. And we lost a child. His name was Gabriel Fernandez, and he has become a symbol. Could you tell us about Gabriel and what happened with this young boy?
Gabriel was it was just an absolute tragedy. The system failed him in probably every step of the way. Where proper notifications were made, follow-ups weren't, even from inside, from the family, to the sheriff, to social workers. The system just
teachers,
everybody just crisscrossed. It was an absolute tragedy that he eventually, died.
He was killed.
Allegedly
killed by
right.
a family
Allegedly
member.
at this point, but the facts are pretty clear as to, he wouldn't have died on his own there.
Right.
So the issue being is, out of that tragedy, instead of sort of thinking through where we're at, what we're doing, how do we fix that situation? Is it isolated? Is it comprehensive? Is there something? The board voted to put a blue ribbon commission together, which I didn't support. I did not vote for it. I brought out that day, I had, I'm as concerned about what happened to Gabriel as anyone, but I brought out a stack of 875 recommendations before the Department of Children and Family Services. The board unanimously, 18 months before, had approved a strategic plan. They're right in the middle of that. So all of a sudden, all that work stops to create this commission. And then what does the commission do out of its work? 10 members, one of the biggest recommendation drove me nuts is to create another 18-member commission. My whole issue being, the way you save a Gabriel is not to create a bureaucracy or another commission to appoint people or have experts evaluate and pontificate about. You put the money where the resources need to be at the point of the visit with the child. Don't put all the pressure on the social worker. We should have these what I call pressure teams. You shouldn't just, I've been out there, I've walked with them. And I've gone to some of these homes, and the decisions that they have to make without the benefit sometimes of a sheriff, without the benefit of mental health expert, without the benefit of health services or environmental services on the cleanliness, it's very, very difficult to put these social workers who in a matter of minutes have to make a decision. Do you leave the child with the family or you take the child in? There's been a big push. It wasn't that long ago that we had 67,000 kids in foster care. That number's down to about 21,000. Part of the problem getting there, though, is the system moving too fast and such a great effort on reunification that some safety issues were overlooked because you wanted to keep them with the family.
And let's talk about the notion of reunification, which I understand many believe is of paramount concern. But have we gone so far in favor of the pendulum swinging toward reunification that we are putting the county's children at risk?
Well, and again, you're talking to me in my opinion. My opinion says yes, we have. And it's like anything else in government. Sometimes you sort of work towards something and it gets sort of overboard. And I really think that because of the great effort to either one, get kids out of the system and get them back with their families, that at times, and continue to do, we jeopardize the health and safety of the children. Who have no choice in these situations.
At the same time, though, you said there are 21,000 children in foster care. Gabriel Fernandez died, but that means he wasn't in foster care, but 21,000 children seem to be doing all right.
Yeah, but well, when I say foster care, but in addition, you still have they may have foster care situation, but you still have the same condition. Do you leave Gabriel with his family, or you to bring him out and put him into foster care?
Are we making policy based upon one tragic anecdote? It's easy to get flabbergasted by one case when there are 20,000 other situations that are working.
To me, the best way to handle the Gabriel situation was to take that very specific case, start from the very beginning, from the family's first contact, all the way through, hold people accountable, look at the issue, and then start backwards. How do we fix that particular problem? What we did instead, over my objection, and again, you're just talking to one member of the board, was to put a commission together of some very qualified people. Very qualified people. But some are academic, some have never been social workers, some are part of the judicial system, and the judicial system at times fails in this process too, and they're for few. But my point being is, instead of analyzing and understanding how Gabriel died and the harm's way that he was put in and how we fix that from happening to the other 21,000 or
Whatever it may
whatever the number may be, that to me the overreaction was to create another blue ribbon commission, which in turn wants to create another blue ribbon commission, which in turn wants to create an office of czar for child safety.
And these commissions, as I understand it, be it through an audit or through a special order to create a commission, they don't have enforcement authority over their recommendations.
Absolutely not.
And
it all comes back to us. And that's my point. I mean, do I need a blue ribbon commission to tell me that Gabriel's death was an absolute tragedy? That the system absolutely failed this young man? I didn't need that. I don't need it today. I want to know how we fix it. I want to know how we make it better so there are no more Gabriels. And he has become a symbol, and for me as well. I mean, to try to find solutions to these things. But really was the point of contact. I mean, that's where the system...
But we also, if I may, we live in a county with over 10 million residents. If LA County were a state, it would be larger than Michigan.
Right, somewhere between Ohio and Michigan.
Right. So I question whether we just have a bureaucracy that is so large it's really an octopus that you really can't manage.
Well, there's good and bad of being big. You know, the bad, you can look at it that way. The good being is that we are big enough to have the resources to be on the cutting edge to do things that maybe a Yolo County couldn't do with the resources and innovative, creative kinds of things. And that was my point in my opposition to the Blue Ribbon Commission. One, you had the stack of initiatives already. The other thing, you had a strategic plan in place. You have a change of culture in the department, things moving forward, social workers, better training, doing all the kinds of things. And so my point was let's analyze what happened to Gabriel and how we fix that so it doesn't happen again.
What I understand, and I'm just an outside observer, is that many folks who work in children and family services say that these social workers are overburdened. They simply have too many cases.
I would agree with that. And I think that's part of our responsibility to get the resources. And we've been doing that. Excuse me, they're in the process of hiring 400 more social workers.
And so when you look at the hiring of social workers, 400 presumably could be of benefit, presumably.
Right.
But is that enough in a county of 10 million?
There are those that say it should be 1,200. Excuse me, I'm sorry. But the point being is that those resources, we have to put them. And again, so what should you do? Should you put the resources into hiring more social workers or to create another bureaucracy, a czar, 12-member commission, whatever it may be? Or do you try to fix the problem? Brad, I'm just telling you, if you ever walked or spent a day walking a walk with these social workers and the calls that they get, particularly the emergency calls, I couldn't do it. I call them angels because there is absolutely no way, number one, the burden being there, and number two, the fact, the pressure put on them to make instant decisions on the life and death of a child in a potentially very dramatic situation.
So where do we go from here? The commission's done, final report coming out, whatever it may be, now what?
Well, we're going to evaluate what the commission says. I mean, there are many recommendations in there that we all absolutely support, that are inside the strategic plan, that are inside the 875 recommendations, maybe one or two new ones. I mean, the one new one being the 18-member commission or the czar, which I have a problem with both of those. But where we go forward from is, how do we do it? I mean, do we get the resources? Is the ultimate resource to be hiring more social workers, better training, accountability, oversight?
Okay, his name is Don Knabe. He is the chair of the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. My name is Brad Pomerance. We'll be right back on Charter California Edition.
During the last decade, how many children died as a result of child abuse in the United States? From 2001 to 2010, 15,510 children in the United States died at the hands of a child abuser.
This is Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance, and Mike Souborious is back. I love his last name. He is a council member in the city of Riverside, a new council member. And since you've joined the council, we have been speaking about general livability issues. I mean, look, Riverside's a beautiful place. It did well during the economic downturn, but it's a large city. And people still are struggling a bit. Talk to us about how 83 square miles is doing, on the other side of the economic downturn and some of the struggles you still face.
Yeah, it's doing quite well, actually. There's always going to be issues, and you always need to challenge yourself and say, what can we do better? And how can we do things differently?
Right.
But Riverside's done well economically. We planned ahead. We hit that renaissance a while back.
And for our viewers statewide, the Renaissance was really a revitalization program.
It was.
Right in the middle of the recession, but you had money for it because it had been appropriated before the recession.
Yeah, so all that was done really to make up for about 30 years worth of rebuild or remodeled, so to speak, in infrastructure in a matter of about 4 to 5 years.
What a gift that was.
Yes.
I mean, literally in the heart of the recession, Riverside, unlike any city in the Inland Empire or all of California, was under construction.
Yeah.
That being said, so we're now on the other side of the economic downturn. We still see some folks struggling.
Yes.
And I know as a former police officer that you're acutely aware of those folks and their struggles and trying to help them out of their struggles. Talk to us about the struggles that you do see on the streets.
You can go as far as the homeless that you see on the streets that we have programs for, that we outreach for them. You've got a lot of people that when I knocked on doors during my campaign, I met with a lot of folks that, it was heartbreaking. They told me I've been without work for, 6 months, a year, or some of them were 2 and 3 years.
And you live in a fairly high-scale district, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
upscale district.
We've got some of the richest neighborhoods in the ward and some of the maybe moderate to lower, economic scale. But it was really tragic to see that. So I'm doing everything in my power, and know the city is, in general, to promote making Riverside a destination, bringing as many businesses as we can in. And we've seen an increase, and I think we came out number 1 or number 2 recently on a at least for last month, on job creation in the United States.
I did see that, yes. The congratulations on that. That was huge news. At the same time, you have been part of the passage of what's known as a Community Livability Task Force Action Plan.
Yes, that's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful. I managed to get it out. Tell us about the plan.
Well, when I was knocking on doors during my campaign, a lot of business owners and a lot of residents talked to me about the issues with panhandlers, and mostly it was panhandlers at the forefront, the aggressive panhandling, where they had people knocking on their windows at ATMs when they were driving through, or at a restaurant parking lot, or drive-through, or whatever the case may be. A lot of issues there, the end of the freeway ramps, things like that. So there was a lot of issues that really focused on 3 things: social, economic, and safety. The people's safety, economic, if you're going to see people investing in Riverside and they come by and they see panhandlers, is this a comfortable place? We had one individual that is working with the convention center that, there was some booking concerns because of that. So this is all in that economic, social.
And I understand that as part of this action plan, the council appropriated money for homeless outreach officers.
Yes.
Just generally more law enforcement resources being spent towards that community.
Yes, and what this did is it paired together, or actually not just paired, but put together a whole list of people that, like for instance, Riverside County Mental Health, put the city attorney's office together, code enforcement, parks and recs, police department, even fire department, put all the different departments and agencies together to basically have a comprehensive approach to this, so that not only are we just addressing, okay, you broke the law by standing out in the center median panhandling, but is there a homeless issue, or is there a mental health issue? And so we're addressing all these all in one package.
And let's talk about mental health, because that ultimately, you've told me, can be the number one challenge, is that these folks, some have fallen on hard times, but some are just profoundly mentally ill.
Yes.
What do you plan to do as part of this action plan to address that very specific issue of mental health?
Well, the different county mental health folks will come out and evaluate the need, and there's also Laura's law that basically allows for some type of oversight, depending on to what degree, as far as let's say a person's not taking medications that would keep them pretty much normal, but they're not taking these medications and they go off the
And let's talk about Laura's law. It's a very interesting piece of legislation passed in 2002, and it allows a court to order
Yes.
mental services.
Yes.
You know, so many of our homeless are service resistant, but this law does allow a court order to mandate.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that program? I ask you not only as a council member, but as someone who's worked in law enforcement.
Well, you know, I think it's just it's a fix to what happened in the 80s when the federal government deinstitutionalized a lot of disorders and said, you know, these people are no longer in an institution, but we're going to put them outside and basically kick them out of the system to fend for themselves. So I think this takes care of some of those folks that if they can be medicated and if they follow the regimen, that they're going to be okay and they're going to be able to be productive in society. But if they come off that program, then this is a way of saying, look, you're not doing what you're supposed to do, and you're, you know, creating a problem because of your behavior. So we can, for periods of time, institutionalize.
So, but can these be effective? I mean, especially with the most service resistant?
You know, I think you're going to have that fringe of people that just, there's maybe nothing we can actually do to change them or help them. This is people that I think are kind of more in the middle, that with medications they act fairly normal and they're not putting themselves in danger or others.
I want to talk to you about what often is a symptom of mental health, and that is substance abuse.
Yes.
Which it can be devastating on so many levels. There is one element of substance abuse that you're looking at as part of the action plan. It deals with alcohol sales.
Yes.
Explain what the plan is looking at in terms of that specific element, the sale of alcohol.
Well, it's looking at some of these locations that may be a little bit more prone to, you know, selling a single bottle or a can and then having a lot of people hanging around the area, and, you know, basically you've got people that are, you know, half passed out around the side of the buildings, things like that. We're more of a nuisance place.
Why is the sale of a single unit troublesome? I would think that if you're passed out, you've drank more than a single bottle, so explain.
I think it would be the money thing, that they're spending a couple bucks here and there on a bottle and then going to get another one, but they're not as apt to carry around like a six-pack or you know, a case of something.
And so what is the plan looking to do? Are you looking to restrict the sale of single units?
Yes, I think in certain locations, and again, the ones that are prone to where there might be a congregation of folks that tend to do this more than other places.
So how has this plan been received? Look, we all have we want to be sensitive to the needs of everyone in the community, those that may face mental illness, those that not. So what's been the progress on this plan early out?
Well, I know that the police department, and to their credit, and many thanks to them for stepping up and starting this even before this plan was completely adopted, they started stepping up a lot more aggressive enforcement of some of the rules, and City Council had also beefed up some of the rules. Like, actually, we didn't have something about in place for them to not stand in a center divider meeting, which is unsafe for them.
But enforcement, of course, that's a very important element.
Yes.
But again, what do you do? I mean, you can arrest a homeless person 100. You told me, didn't you arrest someone 83 times or something?
I wrote over 200 and some tickets.
What is that going to? You know, in the end, it's about you're telling me services.
Yes.
So, yes, there's the enforcement element. What about the service element?
Well, you know, as far as, you know, we want to take care of the homeless and we want to try to end that cycle. And, and the ones that are willing, that aren't drunk and drugged and, you know, or mentally ill to the point that they are not, you know.
Right. Does Laura's Law look at addiction as well?
I think it does to some extent. It would probably be on if they're abusing the drugs that they're supposed to take or not, and then combo things. But, you know, on the others, it's just a matter of, you know, like on the panhandling tickets, for instance. You might say, okay, if we ticket them 200 times, you know, is that going to stop it? Well, actually it is, because there's a certain point in time where if they're doing something, you might be able to take them to jail for the misdemeanor, that they'll stay for 4 to 6 to maybe 8 hours and get cited out, but they don't like being incarcerated. It interrupts their flow of money taking, you know, on the freeway ramps, for instance. And, you know, like we spoke last time, you know, the best way to actually stop that is to not give, but to give to the charity that serves them.
Right. His name is Mike Souborious. He is a member of the Riverside City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we thank you for watching Charter California Edition.